Hey everyone, Cooper here, host of the fine podcast you're listening to. I just want to let you know that the episode you clicked on has a format that is very heavily inspired by a podcast called The Bookening. To be clear, our thoughts and opinions in this episode are our own, but the format is very similar to this podcast. I just wanted to give you a heads up and give credit where it is due. With that out of the way, enjoy the show. Coming up next, the book and it reads Pride and Prejudice. Hey everybody, welcome back to Bookin' It. I am, of course, your humble and eloquent host, Mr. Cooper Cobbs, and joining me today is my good friend, Mr. Matthew Killingsworth. How you doing, Matthew?
Howdy. I'm good.
Well, what's been going on in your life? All good?
Oh, yeah, just work, pretty much.
Yeah.
And school, work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I shot a deer.
Yeah, I saw the picture. I was impressed. Especially
Yeah.
after Isaiah. Isaiah went hunting for a while and then shot just about everything but a deer and was
Yeah, it's true. He
fairly
did, yeah.
disappointed. And then you guys got a deer like the first few hours you were out there. It was
Yeah, so
it wasn't you, it was your cousin, right? But
it was my friend who's like a cousin, basically. We're very close to the
Right.
family. But so what happened was they have a bunch
Brady,
of family in
right?
Arkansas. Yeah, Brady. And we went up there. They invited us. It's Arkansas Youth Hunt. So basically, everybody 15 and under gets like a weekend before the real hunting season. And so we went up
Nice.
there to go shoot. And so we get there Friday afternoon. That's why I had to leave early from CC. And me and Keenan, his older brother, are at the shooting range with my dad and their grandpa because I wanted to get some rounds in before I actually went out and shot at something that was living. But then Brady and his dad went to a little blind. It's like, the camouflage box that has like slits in it.
we
And-
know what a
and-
blind is, Cooper.
Right, okay, you do. Yeah, Matthew does. I don't know about the audience. But he went out and he sat in one of those in his grandpa's backyard because they had been seeing some deer back there. And so
Wow.
we're heading home from the shooting range, and we get a text. Brady shot at a deer. Don't think it hit it, because they were looking at the arrow, and it didn't look like it had any blood on it. But they were just looking at the tip, and they looked at the shaft, and the shaft was coated in blood. So the
Oh.
crossbow bolt went through the deer.
Wow.
Yeah, and so anyway, we go look, and we find the deer, and it's a doe. But it's a pretty big doe. It was shot through the lungs and ran for about 50 yards and dropped dead. So the next day, we go hunting, and nobody kills anything. I shoot at a deer, then I miss. But then the next day, Sunday morning, before church, we went out early. This was daylight saving, so the time had just changed. And me and Keenan, no joke, kill a deer within 10 minutes of each other in the same spot. Like we're
Wow.
20 feet away from each other. Yeah. Anyway, it was a really fun time. So, yeah. But anyway,
So
you're not here for hunting.
yours
Oh,
had
sorry.
some little horns on it. Or little
It did.
antlers.
It had it's what we call a spike. So that's a buck that's about 1.5 years old. So this is the first year he's
Mhm.
growing horns, and I called him
Nice.
Devil because his horns like little devil's horns on top of his head. Yeah. But the audience is not here to hear hunting stories. They're here to hear two teenage guys talk about Pride and Prejudice. Yeah, the great classic by Jane Austen.
That is right.
You have some notes about Jane Austen, a little biography. You want to go ahead and give those?
Yes. Okay, I have a short, just little bit of information for background on Jane Austen. So, Jane Austen, obviously, was an English novelist, and she had 6 major novels. Cooper, can you name these for us?
All right, let's see. So, Pride and Prejudice, obviously, Sense and Sensibility, Emma, Northanger Abbey, Persuasion, and I forget the other one.
Yeah, maybe you
Let's see.
should have looked them up.
Okay, I was missing Mansfield Park. Okay.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Anyways, so yes, those are Jane Austen's 6 most popular famous books. And then she was also born on December 16th, 1775 in Steventon, England. And wow, I actually that never processed that before. That was a long time ago. I was
Yes,
thinking it was like, I guess she didn't write the books until the 1800s, but
right.
still, like, yeah, 17's, dang. Anyways, yeah, so her plots often explore the dependence of women on marriage in the pursuit of favorable social standing and economic security. And then yeah, so she wrote books during her life, and then she died on July 18th, 1817 in Winchester.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And her parents were named George Austen and Cassandra Austen, if that interests you.
Cassandra Austen. Wow.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. All right.
But
Thank you. Well, then.
I don't know. This doesn't have anything to do with the biography thing, but I did think it was funny how in Pride and Prejudice, the most like perfect sister and the most beautiful one was named Jane, and she like basically just named it after herself.
Yeah, it's true.
The most desired sister of the Bennets.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think Mrs. Bennet says something like, I knew that you were not beautiful for nothing," or something like, or no, you were beautiful for something, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, the
Yeah,
dad always liked, or Mr. Bennett always liked Elizabeth best anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or as Tanner would say, Eliza.
Or Lizzie, I think is what you mean.
No, Tanner just said Eliza.
Oh, he said Eliza? Oh, he did?
Yeah,
Was
what
it in class
they
this
call her
time?
Lizzie throughout the whole book, and then he
Right.
just decided he's gonna call her Eliza because they're pretty tight, you know. Tanner and Eliza Bennett.
That's something that Tanner
Tanner
would
actually is
do.
Mr. Darcy, if you guys didn't know.
Oh, yes. Very, yeah. Yeah. So,
Anyways,
actually, what's
though.
funny? A couple of nights ago,
no.
we started watching the Pride and Prejudice 2005 version with Keira Knightley.
Uh-huh.
And in it, Mr. Darcy is like a beta. Like, he's this, I don't know, he just looks handsome. He looks somewhat handsome and is just kind of cold and beta-ish. But I feel like that's not
He's
really what
Scrooge.
he is in the book. He's more like a too much of an alpha in the book, but in the movie he's kind of like a beta. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
I think Jane Austen wrote all the characters so well in this book, and I haven't read any of her other ones, but I bet she did in the other ones too.
Yeah.
That like by the end of the book, you just knew the personality of all the characters. Like it wasn't
for
very
sure.
mysterious, and that made it more interesting to follow because then it was more focused on like different situations that arose. What was this person going to think if this happened? Blah blah. Like all this random like old rich people like English rich people gossip stuff going around. That's what the whole book was about. And like they were just all so rich, even the poorest people, the Bennets, like they were all just so rich they didn't have to worry about anything except their love lives. Like all day long, every day. It's kind of funny.
Mrs. Bennet especially, yeah.
Mrs. Bennet, oh my goodness.
We'll talk about her. So I really want to focus more on like the overview of Pride and Prejudice in this episode, and then in part 2 we'll talk more about the character because I think that really is what makes this book so special. But
Sure.
before we get to that, I want to get your baggage, your history with Pride and Prejudice.
I mean, I've always known like the name Jane Austen and generally known she was a writer. She wrote Pride and Prejudice, blah blah blah. Never read it until we were required to read it for school, and I was honestly expecting not really to like it because I knew it was about like a bunch of sisters, and it was English. Like, not that I have anything against either of those things. It didn't sound very appealing to me at first, but then when I actually read it, I thought it was pretty funny and it like fairly entertaining just because
for sure.
you're just following like the love lives of these random people and you get so like invested in reading
Wrapped
it.
up, yes, that's
Yeah.
right. Pride and Prejudice, it's not like in a trashy romance novel where you get like invested in the characters, but it's more of like those where you understand the characters. You're more like friends with the characters. You're not like, who's Elizabeth gonna pick, but you're more like, gee, I hope this girl picks the right person.
And you're like,
More of a
I really
fondness.
hope this works out for them because you actually like almost care because she's written the characters so well that you
Yes.
understand them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, my baggage is kind of the same. I think I've always heard the name Jane Austen, always heard the name Pride and Prejudice just being kind of thrown around and knowing it's a classic novel. And I think one of my first physical experiences with it was funnily enough, I was walking through a mall and I saw a poster for Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, a movie that came out like, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. But that was kind of weird, but I guess I always thought it was just funny that it was based off, I don't know, a classic British novel. But anyway, in the more recent years of my life, ever since I've started reading more, I suppose, classics through CC, I've been more and more excited as we've gotten closer to Pride and Prejudice because everybody loves this book, right? It's like one of the most classic novels in the English language, and I was just really, really excited to read it, and I read it, and I enjoyed it a lot. So, yeah. So I think we've already been talking about it, but just what are your overall thoughts on Pride and Prejudice? What'd you like? What'd you not like? Things like that.
I just liked the entertainment of it and how it wasn't dull or boring. It was actually fun to read. And it also it didn't all go over my head. Like, it did have, the language was definitely different. They definitely spelled some things different. They definitely spoke different. But it wasn't like the whole writing of the thing was out of my comprehension because it was all like super old English that was just frustrating to read. It was like generally normal. And then whenever they spoke, they would say things differently. Like, if they were talking about someone else speaking, they'd say, he spak this. Or, like,
they really
if they're talking about ages, they'd be like 3 and 20 instead of 23.
Yeah, that's what,
like,
Matthew,
stuff like
Matthew,
that.
I was thinking, that's what I'm going to do when I'm like 52. I'm just going to say, hey, I'm 26 and 26, all right? Instead of saying I'm 52, like they do in this book. They say, like, I'm 6 and 20. I'm just going to say I'm 26 and 26 when I'm 52.
I don't think that's how that works, but funny.
Sure it does. Yeah. So I guess since we're doing Matthew Cooper edition, you got to do everything. So you want to go ahead and do the book in 30 seconds for us?
Oh, yes, of course. Okay, tell me when.
And go.
All right, so there's this big family called the Bennets, and they're a semi-rich family in a giant neighborhood of a bunch of rich families that all live in mansions. The Bennets consist of 5 sisters. The only ones you really need to be concerned about are Jane and Elizabeth, and then later Lydia. But basically, the story focuses on Elizabeth and a side story of Jane and their boyfriends, who are named Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy. Both really fun to say. Mr. Darcy is like the richest guy ever. He makes like $10,000 a year, which averages out to like hundreds of millions this year. Okay, stop. And then and he has like a little crush on Elizabeth the whole time, but then he's also kind of rude, so they go back and forth. And then Bingley and Jane just hit it off really well because they're both basically perfect human beings. And Bingley's also pretty wealthy, but he only makes like half as much as Darcy, but they're good friends. And so anyways, a bunch of stuff happens, and then everybody gets married to the person they're supposed to at the end, and everybody lives happily ever after.
It's true. All right. Yep. That's basically what it's about. So the character you hear the least about in the book is one of the sisters, Mary. But the actor who plays Mary in the movie married Elon Musk twice, so I don't think we need to be too concerned about her.
Really?
Yes. I'm not lying.
That was fun. Nice.
Yes. All right. So Matthew, Pride and Prejudice, as you said, is about 5 sisters and basically their love lives. Why the heck?
Well, now that we're not in a time crunch, hold on. We can name them now. So Jane is the oldest. Then there's Elizabeth. Yep. Jane is the favorite of Mrs. Bennet, the mother, because she's the prettiest, the best looking, the most popular, like the most perfect. Like, honestly, she is kind of perfect. Like, you don't see anything wrong with her throughout the entire book. She's just kind of there, and you can always rely on her and Bingley both to just do the right thing. Then Elizabeth, she's definitely the main character. You're always like seeing inside her mind, like seeing her frustrations, what she's thinking about. Then there's like Kitty and Mary. I don't even remember who's older. They're both just there.
I think Kitty is.
Kitty and then Mary. And they're both honestly kind of pointless. And like it seems like the mother doesn't care about them at all. Like she just drags them around with them, talks bad in front of them. Like she's like, "Oh, I wish my other daughters were as good as Jane," blah, blah, blah. Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then Lydia's the youngest. She's only like what?
No, Lydia.
Or something?
I think she's older than Mary, right?
No, Lydia was the youngest.
Kitty are the same age and older than Mary.
Oh, well, maybe, I don't know. She's younger than like Jane and Elizabeth though, and she's kind of crazy and not very smart, makes a lot of unwise decisions, goes off and marries like a not good guy. It works out in the end though, thanks to Darcy's money.
Everything in this book is solved by Darcy's money, pretty much.
Yeah, that's true.
Not really, but yeah.
I mean, kind of though. And then, Lydia's kind of a jerk, though, because, like, even after Darcy and Elizabeth, like, resolved all their problems between each other and finally, like, fell in love and got married, like, everyone congratulated them and was so happy for them. And Lydia just writes, "Congrats, I'm so happy you married a rich guy. Now can your rich husband buy my husband a house?" I was like, what?
That's pretty much what it was.
A jerk.
Yeah. And then Mr.
Elizabeth
Bennet
was like, nope.
And then Mr. Bennet was like, I think I like Wickham better than Darcy.
Yeah, I was like, what? Okay. Yeah. But it was just funny. Yep. The mood swings just, like, literally one day, like the parents, the Bennets, are all obsessed with Mr. Bingley because he's proposing to Jane, and like they're engaged. They're so excited. All they care about is Mr. Bingley, Mr. Bingley, Mr. Bingley. And then the next day, Darcy like asks Mr. Bennet if he can marry Elizabeth, and then that's all the parents care about. They're, oh my gosh, we hated you yesterday. Like they would trash talk him. They'd be like, oh, why is Darcy coming over again? And then he asks the Mr. Bennet for permission to marry his daughter, and then the next day they're just fawning over him, obsessed with him. Like, just it's crazy. All they cared about was getting their daughters married.
Yep. Well, Mr. Bennet not so much, but Mrs. Bennet for sure.
But like, he just said yes to whatever. Like literally whatever. He would just sit in his library. People would go ask him for stuff. He'd be like, okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. But Mr. Bennet we don't like him. I think we like him less than we like Mrs. Bennet, which is saying something.
I like Mr. Bennet a lot, actually.
Yeah, maybe because he's pretty funny.
He is pretty funny.
All right. So, Matthew, as a male, and you're reading a book about a bunch of girls and their love lives, why did you like this book, and why should other people read this book, other males?
Because, okay, it wasn't like everything in it was like super hilarious. Like, it wasn't like a comedy. Well, it kind of was.
No,
but it was witty. And when you think about the whole idea of the whole thing, it is just a hilarious thought that like all this whole big book can be based off of one family and their kids' love lives. Like it's just a funny thought. And the fact that like they're just so rich that they don't care about anything except that. Like Mrs. Bennet will admit that her purpose in life is to marry off all her daughters, and then after that she doesn't even know what she's going to do.
Yeah.
Like the whole thought of it just cracks me up. And that's why I enjoyed reading it. But also, I don't know. I guess it was kind of interesting to see how they did things back then. Some of it was kind of weird, like how Elizabeth's cousin proposed to her in like chapter 19, I think.
Yeah.
His name was Mr. Collins. He was a weird dude. And basically
so
he was going to inherit their estate, and he proposed to her, and then he listed off all the reasons that he wanted to marry her, and none of them were anything close to that he loved her. He was just like, it would be most convenient for both of our family situations. It would help you out the most so you won't lose your father's estate once he goes, and it will give me better connections and give you better connections. And I was like, there's no actual reason. She was like, nope, not into that.
Yeah. So in the movie, actually it's funny, they're both in Parts of the Caribbean. Keira Knightley's in Parts of the Caribbean. The guy who plays Mr. Collins, he plays the bad guy from parts 2 and 3. Dead Man's. He's like the British naval commodore, the bad one.
Oh, well, that's not really the bad guy. That's just the foolish guy.
Anti-hero. No, he's not. It's not the one that who proposes. It's the one who like tries to kill Jack Sparrow and enlist Davy Jones and things like that. But anyway, he's like so short and he's like so silly. He's played more. He's exaggerated more in the movie than he even is in the book. But I don't know. Mr. Collins he's different. He's different.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you recommend this book to other guys to read? Like what would they have, and what would they enjoy? What would they glean from it? Why should they read it?
I don't know, just for the entertainment.
Yeah, it's true. I mean,
like I don't know that I would go just read it, but as far as like a school book that if you're being forced to read it, it definitely wasn't bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Honestly, I would recommend it to other people just because it is a novel and it is funny. It's very witty and you can love the characters, but also it's kind of like a manual for how not to propose and how to propose kind of thing. Like when you propose, you make sure that the girl you're proposing to doesn't hate your guts. Am I right?
Yeah.
Darcy. And Mr. Collins, #no means no. Am I right?
Right.
But it's
that's what you can learn from the contrast between Collins and Darcy's proposals. So Collins proposes, gets turned down, and he's like, "Oh, but your no means yes." And she's like, no, by no means
Yes.
no. And he's like, oh, that means you love me. And she's like, no, get out. And he does this like 6
Yeah.
times, and it drives her crazy, and it like ruins any chance he ever had in the future. But then Darcy, he proposes, also a pretty bad proposal, but when he gets turned down, he's just like, okay, leaves for like 6 months, goes and makes himself a better person, comes back, and then she likes him, and then they get married happily
Yeah.
ever after. It's like
For
smart.
sure.
Like he actually,
Yeah.
like, just
He learned.
even if you've already made a foolish decision, just stop and make the wise decision then, instead of continuing to just be idiot.
Yeah. For sure. So Pride and Prejudice has obviously stood the test of time. I mean, we're here 10 years later or so, and it's still a classic novel. So why do you think that Pride and Prejudice has lasted this long? Why do you think that so many people love it?
Because I guess it's always gonna be kind of relevant.
Oh yeah, that's a good
Because
point.
going like having a social interactions like that is something everybody has, even though it's drastically different from the way they used to do it back then. But
Yeah, it's
like-
not anymore who has the best carriage or who throws the best ball. It's who has the best tennis shoes or something like stupid like that. Who has
Yeah.
the new iPhone or something.
well, sure, yeah, which is also why it was funny, because that's like all they were looking at. But
Yeah,
then
it's
also
true.
you did get to see like Elizabeth was like, I don't care about anyone's money. I'd rather just I'd rather marry someone I love, which was
Mhm.
cool to see. Which Jane was also kind of that way, but they also both conveniently married like ultra rich dudes, so
Right,
worked out.
right. Yeah, Mrs. Bennet was. I think she was glad that Jane, quote unquote, sacrificed herself for the family, or something like that. But I think that Jane, yeah, really did love Mr. Bingley, and likewise,
Mhm. I mean, who wouldn't?
Mr.
No, I'm
Bingley's
kidding.
yeah. I mean,
Mr. Bingley
the thing
was
is,
a
in
chap.
the movie, Mr. Bingley,
He was a chap and a half.
yeah, he's a chap, and he's also a Chad, if you know what I mean.
I feel like you've made that joke on here before,
No, I haven't really.
but
Sure
no, I
haven't.
don't know what you mean.
Oh well, Chad's just I don't know. It's something the bros use to describe like a really hot guy.
Oh, well, I'm not
Yeah.
a part of those bros, I guess, but
Yeah, I know. I'm not either, but I'm on the outskirts and I hear things. All right. So, what were some of your favorite things in Pride and Prejudice? Or like the things that you enjoyed the most? The funny thing is, I write these notes beforehand in case you don't know, guys, and Matthew inadvertently discusses all of these things before I ask the questions. But Matthew,
I've not
what were
seen the
your
list. I
favorite
promise.
things? I know that's the problem.
I'm gonna try and say something slightly different this time. What were my like favorite parts or favorite things?
Yeah.
Um, I liked the dialogue, like the conversations, between like everyone, like even the dumbest people in the book, like just the writing of Jane Austen, everything was so just like intelligently written and like well thought out. It was really perfect and
Yeah.
funny
Even
and witty.
the
It was
long
very
monologue-
witty. Yeah, even the long ones. And just like the blunt honesty they all had with each other. Sometimes I was kind of like, I wish we could just be that honest these days without insulting someone or offending someone. Because like,
Yeah.
and they didn't like,
when you're
because like that makes sense to me. I've always thought like if I point out something to you, like honestly reproof you on something or reproof you against the Bible on something, and do it in a really nice, kind way, like you shouldn't get mad about that. And that's like even the worst people in the book would respect a
Mhm.
good reproofing from anyone, as long as it was valid and done in a nice way. And so like that would happen all the time. And then sometimes, of course, it would get a little sarcastic, or they would do it jokingly, but like you could still follow it even with the strange language. Like it was just really funny. Well done.
yeah.
Dialogue there.
Yeah, Mr. Collins, even his long monologues were written.
He was a
they
little
were written like
pompous though.
Yeah, he was, and that's one of the things I think that why it stood the test of time is because you mentioned it, because it's still relevant today. Like we maybe not be talk like Mr. Collins, but we still know pompous people, and we still are in interaction with them, and we know why they talk.
You
and
can attribute
how they
traits, yeah, for sure.
right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he was pretty obsessed with Catherine de Bourgh, and
Yeah.
honestly, like even if he was a really nice guy, and Elizabeth married him, she would have probably just gotten so annoyed with how much he talked about this other lady. Like, every sentence was Catherine de Bourgh this, Catherine de Bourgh that.
Or
Well,
or she would
according
have
to
actually
my-
gotten annoyed of Catherine herself because they dine with her so often.
Well, yeah, also, she was just an annoying person in general. When
Yeah,
you met
exactly.
her later in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, some of my
Because,
favorite
like, he
things.
talked her up
Well,
so much.
really- Mhm.
Here, go ahead.
He did.
Yeah.
No, you go ahead. I'm
Oh,
on
I
a
was just
completely
gonna
different
say-
strand, so if you want to finish.
I was just gonna say he talked her up so much while he was visiting them in the first half of the book that, like, I was willing to respect that. Okay, this guy's an idiot and likes her too much, but she's also, like, just gonna be this high up, well respected by everyone kind of person. And then you finally, like, meet her, and she's like down to the ground, involved in everything, trying to, like, pull strings, and it's just not working.
Mhm. Yeah, my favorite.
She wasn't
my favorite
actually that
thing
cool.
is when she says, "Yeah," she says, "If I had learned the piano, I would have been the most proficient of all in it." Like, she's so silly. She's like, "If I dared to learn the piano, I would be the best. I would be better than you."
What?
She's
Yeah, so arrogant.
condescending. Some of my favorite things. Really, I liked the book up until the first half, or in the second half of the book, I really, really loved. And the main reason that I loved it is because you're just following these characters from the beginning, and they're so relatable, they're so well drawn, and they have flaws, just like you and me. And over the course of time, you see them change throughout the novel. You see Mr. Darcy go from an arrogant, rich person to a guy who's kind and caring and is reforming his ways, and he and Elizabeth, who's grown to know that, end up together, right? And it's just this wonderful, complete character arc of people who are flawed, and who tried to get better, and ended up
Right.
together. So
And I mean, I know it's pretty basic or just expected that fairy tales and, like, stories are going to have happy endings. Like, but think about it. Disney wasn't around at this time. So
No.
it wasn't like expected. And also in general, even
and also
now,
the marry for love trope hadn't really started yet.
right. Not that that's a bad thing, but
No, I'm
But,
just saying,
like,
it was it's a very heavy trope, and
I understand that, like, to some people it gets kind of old these days and they want to change up endings and stuff like that. But I've always respected a good happy ending, and when you're, like, kind of that involved, or, like, feel that involved, feel like you're part of it, reading about it and connecting with the characters this much, and it's just, like, so stressful. You're like, oh, why did you have to say that way? Like, you could have just done it this way. Like, you're thinking that the whole book, and then at the end it all works out. It's kind of relieving, and just, like, you get to breathe finally. You're like, oh, finally. Like, so
yeah,
glad that
and it
worked
feels
out, 'cause-
inevitable too.
Right. Because, like, think about it. If Darcy and Elizabeth hadn't ended up together, which it still could have been a good book, I wouldn't have been
would not
I wouldn't have been
worked.
relieved. I would have just
yeah.
still been tense about it. I would have been like, oh, that was so frustrating how that ended.
Yeah, I agree.
But
All
yeah.
right, so one last question before we go to donor shoutouts here. Which proposal in the first half, either Collins or Darcy's, do you think was the more appropriate proposal?
They were both pretty bad. Let me think for a second.
Yeah,
I'm always just
I
biased
agree.
towards Darcy because Collins was just a
everybody
fool.
knows and everybody knows that she's gonna end up with them in the end. So
Also, if you think about it, Collins didn't really have anything except going back to his little hut and living on Catherine de Bourgh's property or whatever. And
yeah,
but, like, Darcy, even if he hadn't married Elizabeth, he probably would have had a pretty good life, not gonna lie.
yeah. I mean,
Like, he
He's
was
rich.
fine.
yeah,
He was doing fine for himself.
yeah. I think I'm gonna lean towards Mr. Collins, and it's not because I'm all pro Darcy. By the end, I love Darcy, but when this happens, Darcy at this point has tried to separate her sister from her love. Right? That's what happened. Like he admitted to that. And also, we think we know later it's false, but we think that he has squandered this man's, or not given him his inheritance. And so at that point in time, you have Mr. Collins, who's a clergyman, and whose marriage to her makes some sort of sense, even if it's not as desirable, which I'll admit. But I think Mr. Collins had the more appropriate one, even if it's not that desirable anyway.
Yeah, I was just rooting for Darcy the whole time anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of the position that everybody takes, and I agree with it. I mean, I'm rooting for Darcy. Hashtag rooting for Darcy. All right, Matt, let's do some donor shout-outs.
Okay.
I'm going to say the donor, and then you will say...
Are we going to be matchmakers and match the donors?
I briefly considered that, and I was like, nah.
That'd be awkward.
We could. Okay, how about this?
That'd be kind of fun though.
Okay, what you're gonna do?
We could match
is
them to
you're
someone
gonna
in the book instead of each other.
I know. That'd be even. I know. That's what I was gonna do, but no. I'm going to say the donor, and you're gonna make up a name for their manor that they would live in.
Oh, okay,
right.
That's a good one actually.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna
So you
just
can
accidentally say ones that already exist.
That's okay. Just
Okay.
make up random things, like, you know.
Okay,
things.
I got it.
Alright.
I can do it. I can do it.
All right. Nana.
Cottonfield.
Oh, nice. Amchappy and Wayla.
Winterbrook.
Mike and Sylvia.
Serene Forest.
Mr. Mike and Miss Laura.
Glorious Garden.
Sebi.
Okay, how about Masculine Manor?
Oh, also, congrats to Uncle Sebi. He got married recently.
Yes, he did.
Or
yeah.
no, he is. If he is, or
Oh, no, he is this
he
weekend.
is.
That's why Isaiah's
That's
gone.
right. Yeah, that's right.
Well, by the time this comes out,
Congrats. All right, Aunt Jenny and Uncle Sam.
I should have been thinking of one while you were talking. Yellowstone House.
This is awesome. I love this. All right, Moses.
Gentle Creek.
Zara.
Tulip Towers.
Okay. Chris.
Flower Pot Farmhouse. This is the best one we've ever done.
No, I know it is. I know it totally is. All right, Anna.
The House on the Hill.
Sounds so gothic.
Whoa!
All right.
That's not how I meant it.
All right, Emily. You know what, Emily? You're gonna be in the It Just Rained manor. That's...
It just started raining, or
Yeah, it just started raining. All right. If you... Yeah, we're done. All right. If you want a donor shout out, make sure you go to patreon.com/booknet. You can support us there. Give us $5 or more. We'll give you a donor shout out. All sorts of fun content on there. We'll be back in 2 weeks with part 2 of Pride and Prejudice. Sorry for the scheduling mix up. We're on the straight and narrow now. And until next time,
keep on booking.